He's captain of the Norway, a thorn in Union's side, protector of Bell Station and a source of grudging pride. Left the Maziani with their price upon her head, and stayed to guard the stations that the company left for dead. Captain Signe Mallory has no soul, they say. The captain of the Norway has a heart of frozen clay. That on the bridge of the Norway she throws men's lives like dice. Captain Signe Mallory, her eyes are fire and ice.
I have voyaged the dark stars for 5 times the lifespan of a common man, long before our glorious emperor made me one of his, and I tell you this: monsters crawl the blasted faces of myriad uncounted worlds. Creatures so foul they would stop a man's heart just to see, and that is only the start of the true nightmare, for there is no mortal mind that can encompass the wickedness of the alien in all its forms and designs. So then, why should it surprise the wise man that in such a galaxy of terror, humanity should need monsters of its own, if we are to survive? Captain Calico Jack Harlock, sanctioned rogue trader, attached as Pathfinder to the Bloody 13th Expeditionary Fleet. Hello and welcome to another episode of Lost Transmissions, a Battlefleet Gothic podcast set in the Age of Darkness. I'm here with our arena champion, Austin, and as promised, today we are going to talk about the 12th Legion, the World Eaters.
And I'm excited about it. You know why I'm excited about it, Stephen?
Why?
Because I already fucked this up once, and I'm not going to do it again.
Yes. I don't know when this is being released, or if Jesse or if we just missed a release date. But we had a true lost transmission the last time we tried to record this episode. So this is coming to you possibly from who knows when. The warp is fickle, and time is an illusion.
It's true. But there is another reason that I'm excited for this. You know why?
What's the other reason?
Because we get to fanboy all about Latara Saren.
It's true. It's true.
And we will continuously in this episode.
Yes. If you don't know who Latara Saren is, strap in. You'll find out soon enough.
Yeah. Prepare to unfuck yourself.
Yeah. Be filled with knowledge, but beware that not all knowledge brings joy.
True story.
Yep. So getting right into it, the World Eaters, a byword for unbridled carnage. The World Eaters are an unsubtle navy, crashing headlong into enemy lines and lashing out mercilessly at everything in range. Their Gloriana is the Conqueror. The World Eaters' special rule is called Chariots of Slaughter. When lost to the nails, a boarding force beyond compare are the World Eaters, and they seek only one thing: to close with the enemy and butcher them in close combat. Capital ships with Astartes crew must take the Mark of Khorne for 5 points per vessel, which doubles their value in a boarding action. Additionally, carriers with this mark may elect to launch an additional D3 attack craft markers of any type if they are within 30 centimeters of an enemy vessel. If they do so, they must reload ordnance, and they may not launch in the next turn.
Yeah, so that rule, the Mark of Khorne, is, as you probably guessed, just a straight from the original rulebook. You could give things a Mark of Khorne. Mm-hmm. And we thought very, very briefly, if I'm perfectly honest, about giving them something else, because they're not dedicated to Khorne at the start of the heresy, and that's a whole different thing. We don't care, because let's face it, all they want to do is murder people, and they've been wanting to do that since before they were continually painted in red. Because let's face it, that white and blue did not stay white and blue very long.
Nope.
Pretty much since the day Angron showed up for them.
Yep. Maybe even before that. Yeah. Actually, Chariots of Slaughter, the whole rule right there, we didn't write any of that. That's pulled directly out of the Powers of Chaos rule supplement to Battlefleet Gothic. If you did a Khornate fleet, your universal rule was Chariots of Slaughter. And as the description initially said, it's an unsubtle rule. You kind of have one thing in mind, and that's to board the enemy, whether that is with your actual ship in a boarding action, or whether it's Dreadclaws, Thunderhawks. Hell, if you're feeling froggy, you can just bomb them into their component atoms.
Mm-hmm.
An extra D3 attack craft markers of any type it doesn't sound like a lot, right? But when you start counting up all the ways that you can lose deployment of ordnance, it really is helpful. And it's not like a once per game thing or anything. As long as you're reloading ordnance and as long as you're within 30 centimeters, you can keep jumping in the Dreadclaws or Charybdii or whatever and just going for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it is real good, right? Because there are some ships, like you're fighting a battleship. It's got 4 turrets. You've got 4, you've got a dictator. A dictator's carrier complement is generally enough, right? But against 4 turrets, you look at it and go, man, nothing's going to get through, right? You either have to have like 3 fighters and 1 bomber to maybe get a decent number of attacks, and everybody's going to get shot down anyway. But if you can change that 4 to like 6, right? Suddenly you're in a much better place. Or, you're turning your sticks into a pocket emperor or your strike cruiser. All of a sudden can launch, 5 Thunderhawks?
Yeah.
That's just real rude.
That's without taking any sort of like carrier upgrades or anything.
And I mean, you pay for it, right? Because you're committed to reloading ordnance your next turn. And then can't launch attack craft, right? Because the theory behind this is, normally attack craft are launched, and then the next wave is sort of brought up onto the ramps, and they start fitting missiles and clamping down and getting ready to launch. And the World Eaters, all those guys took off too. And undoubtedly, there's a couple dozen, 100, flight crew that have been incinerated due to unsafe launch procedures. So, not only do you have to go drag the ships that were, the fighters and bombers that were at the back of the line, suddenly they're at the front of the line and screwing up your timing, but you got to go find some new flight crew from somewhere.
Yeah, and Marines to get in the next ships, because what do you mean Delvaris isn't on the bridge?
Just shoot him in the head.
It's fine. It'll work out. The dreadnoughts are still there. The important people are hanging around.
Can we talk about Latara Saren now? Is that
not yet? Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
Soon, my friend. I know. So yeah, like Austin said, the extra D3 can really allow you to put enough attack craft onto a target that they'll get through the turrets, or maybe they'll do the extra damage statistically that you need to get a kill or to cripple a target. But there's no limitation on using Chariots of Slaughter when it comes to being under special orders. All ahead full, brace for impact, come the new heading, all of which half your total number of weapons. Or if you're crippled, that also halves your weapons. So you can use Chariots of Slaughter to keep your total level of attack craft more or less level with what it would be if you weren't decreasing your firepower for some reason.
That's not something I'd really thought about, but you're absolutely right. There are times when, you've done some crazy maneuver or you've been forced to brace and you've got attack craft ready to go and you're like, but do I want to launch just for 2? That's not going to get me anywhere. But you're right. You get that extra D3 and suddenly you're right back where you started, and that's not so bad.
Yep. Hit the big red button, turn on the nails, get Karn in a pod. Let's go.
Do it.
Yep.
But we have talked about how they're unsubtle and you get close and you board people. But the other great thing about this rule is you don't have to, right? I mean, yeah, you're not getting a whole lot out of your life if you're playing World Eaters and not boarding the hell out of people and, not bringing a couple carriers to benefit from Chariots of Slaughter. But I feel like it's not something you feel compelled to do, right?
Yeah.
Some of
you
the
only paid 5 points for the mark, and in Battlefleet Gothic, that's practically free.
Yeah, it is free. Let's not screw around. You put it on 25 points to put it on your 5 cruisers. That's nothing. You don't care.
That's a rounding error.
Yeah, it's a rounding error. Nobody minds. And there are other special rules, like the ones that give you bonuses or automatically let you go on certain special orders, that you kind of feel like, oh God, I got to do it. I got to do it. Like, to make my life right, I got to do it.
Yeah, if you're playing
Chariots of
White
Slaughter
Scars
just
but not going all ahead full, what are you doing with your life?
You're just wasting your life. But Chariots of Slaughter, yeah, maybe you want to play it cool for a couple of turns. That's fine.
Yeah,
And
we realized that
encourages it.
Yeah, we realized that playing it cool might not necessarily jive with you World Leader fans, but maybe you're playing Warhounds and there's not a whole bunch of awful Archaeotech jammed in your skull yet.
Or maybe Latara Saren has convinced them to chill the fuck out for 5 minutes because it'll be better off if they do.
Yeah. Speaking of Lotara.
You like how I segued into that?
Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll do it. I know you're excited. The Conqueror. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, when we were writing Gloriana rules, the Conqueror was immediately the first one that got finished and basically came to us out of thin air. No thought was necessary for what to do with it, what its special rules should be. It was there.
We saw a vision of Khorne on his bloody throne of skulls, and lo, he handed a little piece of paper with these rules on it.
Yep. The Conqueror is 455 points, and even though there is a picture of the Retribution in the book, that is not the battleship that it is based off of. This is the only Gloriana battleship that is based off of a template not found in an official Games Workshop publication, and for the life of me, I can't tell you why I did it that way. But I did, and here we are.
Because Khorne demanded it.
Because Khorne demanded it. Satisfaction. He wants a broadside. And then he wants people to board. So, here we go. It is a battleship with 12 hull points. It does have 20 centimeters of speed, 45-degree turn, 4 shields, 5 up armor, with a 6 up prow. So, pretty standard Imperial, 4 turrets. It has 16 weapons batteries on its port and starboard side at 30 centimeters. It has 3 lances on its port and starboard side at 30 centimeters. And it has 8 bombardment cannon on its dorsal location at 45 centimeters. So it's a pretty strong brawler.
And you might be thinking, boss, those weapon ranges are kind of short for a Gloriana. Because, we've talked about a lot of ships with maybe not identical levels of firepower, but 60 centimeter range, 45 centimeter range on everything.
Mm-hmm. It's a very short range ship. It is true.
Khorne wants to see the light in their eyes go out.
That's right. Or the blood come out of the neck, or whatever grievous injury you've inflicted on them. You want to see a
flash of light from 8 million miles away.
Yeah, you want to be up nice and close when you watch them get turned into space gas. Now, most Imperial battleships have torpedoes in the prow. The Conqueror doesn't.
Does
you know
not.
why? Because nobody runs from the Conqueror. Fire the Ursus Claws. Prow Ursus Claws, 45 centimeter range, firepower 7. Now, when I said that the Conqueror came to us fully formed, just like Jesus coming out of the womb in certain Abrahamic myths, this is what came with the Conqueror just immediately. Should we talk about what Ursus Claws are first, or go through the rules first?
Yeah, so this might be a good time to segue into the fluff of this whole thing. So, the Ursus Claws, if I'm not mistaken, owe their life to the Legio Audax, which is the Titan Legion that was running around with the World Eaters for pretty much the entire Great Crusade, or at least as long as Angron was also running around with the World Eaters. And they have Ursus Claws on their Warhounds. And what those are is they're little, harpoons, right? An arm weapon gets replaced with this harpoon that goes out, hits an enemy engine. There's some electromag shenanigans that go on. But the real joy of it is that they then use the Ursus Claw, which is, attached via chain, cable, all that, to the Warhound, to just drag other Titans to the ground, which is an engine kill, right? Titans don't stand back up.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
so
Once they're on the ground, they stay there.
Yeah, so they operate in packs, and there's great stories in the fluff about them doing it to like warlords and reavers and imperators and all sorts of stuff. Long story short, Angron looked at this and decided it was good, and decided that he wanted some, and so mounted the Imperial Navy equivalent on his flagship. So instead of your standard 100-meter long space torpedoes, the Conqueror fires like 200-meter long giant-ass spikes, right? Which are attached to the Conqueror via chains that I don't really... Like, it's hard to wrap your head around how big they are.
They're just big.
Yeah, well, and long, too, right? Because they're fucking 45
yeah.
centimeters.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that the entire prow of the Conqueror is probably dedicated to the launching and retrieval assembly of an Ursus Claw.
And you know it's just 6,000 Ogryn with, like, a capstan to wind it back in.
Yep.
But anyway.
Hauling on those chains.
Yep.
What Ogryn do now? You pull, boy.
You pull like your life depended on it, for it surely does. So they fire these at enemy capital ships, and inside, more often than not, are piles of World Eaters.
Miles and piles of World Eaters.
That will jump out and just cause you to have a bad time. But that's not really what it's there for. What it's there for is, as Steven said, no one runs from the Conqueror. So it shoots these, and then the other ship can't get away, right? Because it's got a 200-meter, massively barbed, magnetic, it's flash welded itself to the other ship. And it ain't going anywhere, because there isn't a ship in the galaxy that can, like, outpull a Gloriana. I mean, I'm sure that's not true technically, but, like, you're not getting away. And then it just blows you to shit with everything else it has, right?
Yep. Regardless of who's running rampaging through your decks.
Yep, because you know who gives no fucks about that?
World Eaters.
World Eaters.
Well, one person in particular. She throws men's lives like dice, but we'll get to that.
She does. We'll get there in just a second.
Yes.
So, for the rules, Ursus Claws can be fired in the shooting phase as lances, right? So you now have 7 shots, 45-centimeter range. They hit on a 4-up. A target struck by Ursus Claws immediately counts as having gone under Burn Retro special orders for the next turn, in addition to any damage caused by the claws. Shields do not work, right? Because these are essentially torpedoes. And again, we didn't really think about it when we were writing it down because we got it as a vision from Khorne. But you might be thinking, hey, if they're like torpedoes, then why can't the other ship just fire its turrets at them? And
because fuck you, that's why.
No. Well, yes, but no. This is where the fun of how things are designed works, right? So a torpedo is a pretty delicate object, right? It's mostly hollow, filled with fuel. It's got explosive heads. It doesn't take a whole lot to knock one off course, right? For the most part, when your turrets hit a torpedo, you're not like detonating it way over there. You're just sort of, making its guidance system not work. You're taking out a couple of thrusters. Something like that is happening. And you're just sort of batting it in the wrong direction. And that's all it takes to miss because you're in space, and space is wide. An Ursus Claw, though, for the most part, is going to be solid, right? It's a dense pile of thing.
It probably travels mostly on momentum.
Yeah, right? Like, it doesn't have, I wouldn't
So good
think,
luck even tracking it.
Yeah, like, it doesn't have a whole lot of, like, engine nastiness. Like, it's not giving off a ton of signals because it's, a big old bar that in the very center of it may or may not have some World Eaters. And it'll smack into you, and you have a bad time. But there's no, like, jet engine on the back, right? And it's kind of like the difference between trying to shoot down a cruise missile and trying to shoot down an artillery shell. If your artillery shell, like, you know, those big World War I artillery shells are like the size of a Volkswagen, right?
The best kind, you mean?
Yeah. You can hit that with, you know, some, like another, like a little tiny, you know, one of those little interceptor missiles, or what do they call it? Not the Aegis, the little minigun that's on ships to shoot down missiles.
But like a Vulcan?
Yeah, but it's a Sea Whiz. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it's like a Sea Whiz, right? Sea Whiz is a turret. It shoots out a whole bunch of bullets real fast, and it shreds the very delicate missile or makes it miss and, you know, blows a wing off, and that's all she wrote. You fire a Sea Whiz at a 2-ton artillery shell, you're still going to get hit by a 2-ton artillery shell, right? There's just not enough mass. So that's essentially what an Ursus Claw is doing, right? That's why there's no turret fire. And this is just such a bad thing for your opponent, because it's 7 lance shots, right? They hit on 4s, they ignore the shields, they do damage. And so
as a side note, the reason we made them hit on 4s instead of against armor, like weapons batteries might, is because it's a giant harpoon. Like, every time that these things are described as hitting another ship of some kind, or anything for that matter, there's no getting around it. It's a melt-a-cutter that goes right through armor. When they're first shown, they're used against Dark Eldar, and one straight up tears a cruiser in half because it hits it so hard. And it's such a fragile target.
Yeah, and the other thing you need to think of is that it doesn't matter a whole lot whether it penetrates the armor fully or not, right? If you've got, you know, that 10-meter thick armor prow of an Imperial warship, and this thing only penetrates like 8 meters, well, good luck. What are you going to do? Are you going to cut through like 2 or 3 meters of your own ship to like try and pry it out? No, congratulations. You've been Ursus Clawed. Prepare to have a bad day.
Here's your medal. Free therapy is available for those who survive.
It will be awarded posthumously.
Yes, pin it right on your corpse.
So there's one more fun thing about this. So you've been hit, and then you go burn retros, right? This is bad for a lot of reasons. The first one, obviously, is that suddenly all of your weapons batteries are halved. You know, all your shooting is halved. It's a bad time. And then you're slow, right? And this really does double duty. You're slow because obviously you're not running from the Conqueror, right? The extra turning is probably because, you know, you might be able to kind of use the inertia of the claws, spin around a little bit more, whatever. But your crew is going to be going batshit insane, right? Maybe some word bearers have popped out. They're not a strike team, right? They're not going to be causing critical hits. They're just going to be reaving their way through whatever crew they happen to find, which, you know, ships are big. That's not really an important factor. But the other thing they're doing is trying desperately to figure out how the hell to get these off our ship. You know, hey, transfer power to the engines, right? Because burn retros isn't we're applying our engine power to like the forward thrusters to go backwards. That may well be, hey, we've got all ahead full going and it just isn't getting us anywhere. So there's a lot of kind of fluff reasons to make the enemy ship go on burn retros. But then the fact that it can't do other orders, right, just from a gameplay perspective, is brutal.
Yeah, because everybody is gearing up to repel boarders or dying at the hands of boarders.
Yeah, speaking of boarders, if the Conqueror initiates a boarding action against a ship that has been struck by the claws, it gains a +5 bonus, in addition to all the other modifiers. And we're going to talk about boarding actions here in a bit. We've been saving them just for this episode.
It's true.
But a +5 bonus...
It's nuts.
Is more than all the other bonuses from the original rules put together.
Yes, this is your I win boarding action button.
Yeah.
And it's bad enough that your opponent is already, like, if you are being boarded by the Conqueror, right? It's bad enough already that it's the Conqueror. It's a Gloriana.
Yeah.
But now there's also Ursus Claws involved.
And
Like, if you got boarded even without getting struck by Ursus Claws, you're about to have a bad time.
Yeah. This is just icing on the cake. You're dead. And then, for extra fun, so you've been hit by the Ursus Claws. Now what? Well, before you die, every turn after you've been struck, after that first time, the ship must pass a leadership test or continue to be under the Burn Retros order. So essentially, you need to like pass a leadership check to represent your crew, you know, putting on their Mark Zero Terminator armor, jumping outside and like pickaxing these things off of you or whatever you, I don't know. Take a melta to it.
If you've ever wondered what a Saturnine las cutter is for, it's for cutting Ursus Claws out of your ship.
That's a true story. Yeah. Get out your las cutters, boys. We're doing it.
Yep.
And of course, the Conqueror may elect to voluntarily detach the claws. Because, hey, it might have other things to do.
Yeah, you never know. Now, there's a lot of good stuff, right, to get in after the Conqueror. But guess what? We're not done with the Conqueror yet. We're not. So just like every Gloriana, the Conqueror has a quote-unquote narrative profile. And it's actually probably my favorite narrative Gloriana because the Conquerors, the rules that we wrote for them interact with the Conqueror in such a way that just makes it a lot of fun and really versatile. So 24 hull points, Gloriana. Still keeps the same speed, keeps the same turns, goes up to 8 shields, haha, auspicious number. Keeps the same armor value, 5 up, 6 up front, and 7 turrets. It goes to 36 weapons batteries on its port and starboard, 9 lances on its port and starboard, still 30 centimeters. Goes up to 20 bombardment cannon on the dorsal spine, and 12 Ursus Claws. So right off the bat, the Ursus Claws can just straight up annihilate a battleship if you roll really, really well.
I mean, and they'll take out a cruiser without rolling really, really well, right? Like,
yeah.
Lock on. All right, 6 hits, 6 miss. Reroll misses, 3 more hits. Oh, that's 9.
Oops.
It ignores your shields, brah. It's
yep.
catastrophic
Good
damage,
night.
I guess.
Yep.
You asked for this, listeners.
Yeah.
Us to.
You did this to yourself. So there's a couple of the narrative rules apply to the Gloriana, like I said, in a fun way. One of my favorite ones is fleet killers, and we may have talked about some of these before. We've done enough now that I can't remember. But fleet killers, Gloriana battleships host firepower surpassing even the strength of amassed warships and can met out murderous damage with surgical precision. So a Gloriana automatically passes all command checks to separate its firepower against multiple targets, and it gains a left shift on the gunnery table before any other modifiers are applied. So the left shift doesn't do a whole lot in this situation, at least not any more than it does for any other ship. But the separating its firepower, we may have mentioned before, most ships can divide all ships can divide their firepower with a successful command check. Now, they fire different weapon systems at different targets. So like a Gothic with its 2 lances, 6 weapons batteries could pass the command check and fire a lunar. Yeah. I can never remember. I'm a Chaos player. Can fire its weapons batteries at one target, its lances at another target. The Conqueror can do the same thing, but importantly, it applies to the Ursus Claws, which you have 12 of, and now the Conqueror is unique in this, can divide that one weapon system across multiple targets. Because it doesn't necessarily fire like a lance in that it's firing at a single point, right? It fires more like a shotgun of harpoons because it's hard to see things in space, and even harder when, it's 45 centimeters away. Well, the scaled equivalent of 45 centimeters. So the Conqueror just kind of blasts out claws in a general area where they know the ship will be, and statistically, a couple of them are going to hit. And really, only a couple of them need to hit.
Mm-hmm.
So you can divide up that those Ursus Claws to hit multiple targets at once, as long as they're all in your front arc. Maybe you see a nice little squadron of cruisers or light cruisers that you just want to ruin, right? So you take 6 claws, you shoot at one, you take 6 claws, you shoot at another, bam, you hit both of them, bam, they're both on burn retros. Reel them in.
Yep. And there's another fun Gloriana rule that I'm, again, 90% sure we've talked about, but is real good for the Conqueror, because you remember, you can elect to launch another D3 attack markers if you're within 30 centimeters, but the Conqueror has no launch bays.
Oh, no.
If you're using the narrative Glorianas, they get a special rule called carrier capacity, which is basically to represent that these things are so atrociously large that even the ones that aren't really built to be carriers, just their standard, like, loadout is a carrier, right? Like, they just have the capacity. They're the flagship of the Legion. Even, like, the equivalent of a Dictator or Lunar's, like, area where supply ships come in and, like, drop stuff off, or, like, all those little Arvis are hanging out. On a Gloriana, that's full of Storm Eagles and Thunderhawks.
Mm-hmm.
So, all Glorianas without launch bays have port and starboard launch bays that could launch up to 6 squadrons of Thunderhawks or Thunderhawk Annihilators in addition to their normal armaments. And then you do that, and, hey, look, you can go ahead and get that extra D3 attack craft markers, and it's exciting.
Yep. And one of those attack craft markers can carry Angron. Like, he can just hop in there and go nuts. Because once per game, any hit and run attack launched from a Gloriana can be nominated as carrying the Primarch and his bodyguard. This can be a teleport attack or a single assault boat. If the attack is successful, the stricken ship in question will automatically suffer bridge-smashed critical damage. If the attacking wave is destroyed, there is no penalty. It is assumed that the proper measures were taken to keep the Primarch safe, insofar as anyone cares if Angron is safe.
Yes, and it doesn't matter at all for the 12th Legion in the Void whether Angron is safe or not, because he, as I'm sure you probably suspected, isn't the brains of the operation.
Yeah. You know who is, though?
Ooh. Who is it, Steven?
I'll give you a guess. And the first one doesn't count if you get it wrong.
Is it Latara Saren?
It is Latara Saren. Yay! A woman who is described as aggressive, even by World Eater standards.
Yes. Karn described her as aggressive.
Yeah.
Karn.
Latara Saren is probably the best mortal character in the Horus Heresy books.
I object to your use of the word probably.
Fair. She is. She's the best. There's no one cooler. Poor little, even though Katsuhiro is an angel, he is a blubbering baby. And Latara Saren is fucking awesome.
She is. She's essentially the patron saint of this podcast.
Yes. We love Latara. We've basically waited, I don't know, this is what, episode 15 or 16? Are we in the 20s yet? I don't know.
Who knows? Time is an
Yes.
illusion.
Numbers are fake. We have waited the entire series to do the World Eater episode. Like, we had considered just going completely out of order with the Legions just so we could do World Eaters first because we like them. Well, we like Latara.
We like Latara. I don't think either of us are real World Eaters fanboys.
Nope.
No.
No, not super. I mean, I like them a lot, but...
Like they're not bad for a Traitor Legion, but God, Latara Saren. All right,
Yes.
So Latara is the youngest, I think, youngest captain in the Imperial Navy, and certainly the youngest person to ever get on a Conqueror. How old was she when she took over the Conqueror?
30, I believe.
Yeah. So let's put that in perspective, and we'll do it two ways. The first is, who's a captain at 30 in the real world?
Not me.
In the U.S. Navy, nobody. Right? Let's see, you spend 2 and then 4. That's insane. You're a lieutenant?
If you're lucky. If you're good.
Well, not if you're lucky or good. Like, the first couple are just sort of automatic as long as you're not bad.
Oh, well, there you go.
But you're a lieutenant. You're about 3 steps removed from a captain at 30, and there's just 0 ways you can improve on that.
Even if a bunch of other people die.
Yeah, like you would need some like World War II level, probably more than that, to be captain of anything important, right? Because again, this is a Gloriana. This is the equivalent of like, the Gerald Ford, like the nuclear aircraft carrier in the United States Navy, or like a battleship in World War II, right? You don't.
It's a big deal.
You can be a captain. This isn't your first one, right? The guys that are in charge of the big ships in the U.S. Navy, like they're called captain because that's the title for someone who's in charge of their own ship, but really they're admirals of some sort or another. So that's how you progress in the wet navies of today. That's so much harder in the grim darkness of the far future because you have juvenant treatments, right? Like, there are people that will live literally for centuries.
Yeah, the rogue trader at the beginning of this episode said 5 times the lifespan of a man, which is probably an imperial man, which is at least 100.
Yeah, like he's probably been doing this for, even real, like conservatively, 400 years. So you got guys that can run around, and like if you're a captain at, in your 200th year and you've got 200 more years to go, and you're on your ship, like nobody can move up, right? You've got that ship until you drop dead or get promoted. And so does everybody in front of you. So, like, even being on the bridge as an officer at 30 would be a crazy, like, oh my God, they're so good at this. She's in charge of the Gloriana.
Which is flag captain of the Legion.
Yeah, she's flag captain of the Legion. And on top of that, just because, world eaters are world eaters, she's also the lady in charge of essentially the Legion. Like, not in the sense of, like, she says where they go and what they do, but in the parts that matter, right? In the logistics of the thing. In figuring out, how to get more ships into the fleet. How's the fleet going to operate as a unit in battle? How to get more crew and replacement stuff and all the sort of really boring things that we as wargamers, we don't game out logistics, but that's what wins wars. And she's doing it. Not only is she doing it, she's amazing.
She does it well.
And not only does she do her job well, but like Steven says, the world eaters love her. Right? And this is a Legion that doesn't give 2 shits about logistics. Right?
As long as the chain axes run, they don't care.
Yeah. Essentially, it's, what if all the jocks on the football team looked over at the nerd in, like, the math club and were like, my God.
This is the best person ever.
Like, you are amazing and we love you.
No.
And she's not even doing their homework.
Yeah, she's just doing her job. Yeah.
And
like,
despite being a woman, and therefore no actual balls, has the biggest pair in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Steven, why does she have the biggest pair in the galaxy?
She shot Delvaris in the head and sent him to his room without dinner.
She absolutely did. For those people that don't know who the World Eaters are, who is Delvaris, Steven?
Delvaris is captain of the first Triari, of which there are 3. And the Triari are I don't know if they're company strength, but there's a lot of them. But their job is to protect the Conqueror from borders. Like, they are the armsmen of the Conqueror.
They're specialist, like breacher, zone mortality kind of guys fighting on spaceships.
And Delvaris is the baddest motherfucker in the Triari. He's the boss of the Triari. He is so good at reducing people to smears of wet grease that in the gladiatorial arenas that the world eaters fight in when they're not fighting, unfortunate souls, Delvaris is undefeated. He's crazy.
Yeah. And he's in full Terminator armor when it happens.
Yeah.
He's
And
wearing Cataphracti.
during the Shadow Crusade, during the Battle of Armatura, Delvaris gets bored being on the Conqueror while everyone else is down on the planet getting their shit rocked by Ultramarines.
It's true.
So he goes down, he takes his Triari, he goes down to the planet, and he goes and joins in on the fun. Well, meanwhile, the Ultramarines board the Conqueror, which is a really sad... it's not a good idea, right? Like, they made a mistake. But the fact that Delvaris takes all of his men and aren't there is a problem. Lotara and a whole contingent, the entire contingent, I believe, of the Conqueror's dreadnoughts have to defend the ship against what equates to probably a company or two of Ultramarines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they fight him off, but Lotara is pissed.
She's real angry. Like,
She is not happy.
It took
And
a
again, this is a
while.
woman that the world leaders
standard-
consider aggressive.
bog standard human. She's got
Yeah.
nothing, right? She's 30. She doesn't even take Juvenant treatments yet.
Yeah.
And she's pissed off, right? Because, yes, the dreadnoughts woke up and eventually handled the problem, but it took a lot longer than it should have. A lot of stuff got damaged. A lot more crew got killed than should have. And not that she's super sentimental about, like, the lives of her crew. She doesn't throw them away and is totally uncaring. But, like, you didn't
But they're
kill-
trained personnel.
Yeah, they're trained people, right? They're hard to replace, possibly even impossible at this point, because the heresy's
war
underway. It's not like there's a Horus Lupercal Naval Academy that's operating. And Delvaris comes back and comes onto the bridge, and the first thing Latara Saren does is draw her sidearm and shoot him in the head.
Yep. It doesn't kill him, mind you, because he's a space marine.
It's just a las pistol, like she.
Yeah, she basically gives him a bad acne scar. But she
But
makes her
then-
point.
The best thing about it is, so she shoots him in the head, and maybe we can explain that away, like, she's really pissed off, maybe she had a bit of a death wish. She shot a Praetor and Terminator armor in the head with a las pistol. Sure. But then she begins to berate him and just lights into him just with all of the, like, contempt and anger of just anyone you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, you ever been
explaining-
chewed out by your mom? Like, ratchet it up to 11.
Yeah, ratchet that up to 11. Or like you had a shitty boss and you've done a shitty job and it's lit into you. This isn't like the disappointed, you really should have done better. No, this is you are garbage and I can prove it with math. Sit down while I show you. So she lights into him and then says, go to your quarters. You are confined there. And Delvaris, again, Praetor of the World Eaters, in command of one of the prestige close quarters units of a legion known for being close combat monsters and having zero self-control, says, okay, and does it.
Actually, he says, I recognize my failing and will take steps to correct it.
And we'll be sure to correct it.
Yes, we'll be sure to correct it.
And then he leaves and goes to his room. And that's just how awesome she is. That he doesn't talk back. He doesn't, punch her head off like the lion did to that one poor guy.
Oops.
Yeah, brought that up. He's just like, oh, I did fuck up.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to my room and rethink my life.
She talks back to everybody. She refers to the Conqueror as her ship to Angron's face.
Well,
Angron.
not to his face.
to the
Actually, to his
holographic
face too,
projection
yeah.
of his face.
Yeah, when they're on Armatura, and there's a lot of atmospheric interference, and the nails, and she can't get a hold of anybody when she's trying to figure out where the hell Delvaris is gone. And finally, she gets a hold of friggin' Angron, and Angron goes, "What's going on with my ship?" And Latara's like, "No, my ship. is fine.
My ship is fine.
Like, no thanks to Delvaris. I'm going to shoot him in the head when he gets back.
Yeah.
A big shout out to all our patrons in the month of August, starting with our Praetor tier, Alex Selth, Chris Mack, Joe from Music City Heresy, Gardner.Tree of Woe, Matthew Boyce, Jacob Dillon, Mr. Baldwick, and Nicholas Quenga. Our Centurion tier, Mark Henry, John Christensen, Angry Boy, Black Label Painting, Andrew N., Scott LeMay, Minis by Applesauce, M. Tanzer, and Queen Corswain. And finally our Sergeant tier, Emily O'Hare, Duncan, Travis Smith, Garrett Lowe, Aaron Maynard, and Nicholas Gillen. Thank you for your patronage. And if you enjoy our programs and want to become a patron, go over to patreon.com/RR30K podcast and join today. Thank you.
Yes. Even Karn, the yet-to-be betrayer, is like, yep, Lotara's my buddy. Don't fuck with her, because she'll mess you up. And if she doesn't, I'm going to have to. And I don't want to have to do that.
Nobody wants to have to do that. But then, and the best thing is, so as the heresy proceeds, the Conqueror, being the flagship of
a demon Primarch,
begins to act a little weird and begins to go a little chaosy.
Yep.
So
Dex turning into flesh, water turning into blood, you know.
Yeah, the usual, right? And as we all know, things like ships have machine spirits, and when those get corrupted, like the Conqueror, a Gloriana, has the biggest and nastiest machine spirit probably in the Imperium, right? Just because of its size and it's built to be angry. So when a demon takes hold, it's like a comparably powerful demon, right? Mm-hmm. It's not even like your run-of-the-mill bloodthirster that's in charge of this thing. It's like somebody from the Octet is probably running around in the Conqueror's soul, and it wants to make Latara happy.
No. Yes. Yeah, rose-watered in blood is a wild ride. Spoilers. There are spoilers coming.
Yeah, we'll not get into the details because A Rose Watered in Blood is a beautiful short story. And I won't say that Latara is particularly thrilled by the ways the Conqueror tries to make her happy, because again, she's just a normal person, even at this point. And the Conqueror now has Dex made of flesh. But yeah, it's not only like Karn and Angron and everybody else that tries to stay on Latara's good side. It's a literal bloodthirster of Khorne. Because she's amazing.
She is. She's crazy. So, which begs the question, how do you represent people like Lotara in the rules? Well, here's one we haven't talked about yet. And we haven't talked about it because, again, we saved it specifically for this episode. Mm-hmm. It's called Peerless Bridge Crew. A Gloriana is the lodestone for the Legion's best and brightest officers. Oftentimes, a Gloriana's junior officer will take the post over captaincy of a lesser vessel. A Gloriana automatically passes its first order of the turn, and it may attempt a second order at a -1 leadership penalty. Now, bear in mind, they are always flat 10, so leadership 9. If successful, any duplicate negatives from orders do not stack. Legions that automatically pass an order must use the relevant order first. So, like, if you're playing White Scars and you use your first order as all ahead full, you automatically pass it. The next one you take at -1. Mm-hmm. So, again, with the Conqueror, you can lock on, fire the Ursus Claws, while also reloading your ordnance because you chariots of slaughtered your way straight into the heart of the enemy.
Right. And, or you can get real crazy, because unlike every other battleship I can think of, Conqueror or Glorianas don't have penalties about come to a new heading or all ahead full or burn retros. They can do the whole gamut, right? A normal Imperial battleship can't come to a new heading. Too big. Got too much going on. Mm-hmm. Like the drives can't take it. These can. And you get rid of duplicate negatives, right? So you can brace for impact, say. All right, your weapons and all that are halved. Well, I also want to come to a new heading. Your weapons and armor theoretically would be halved, or weapons and turrets would be halved again. Not the case. anything that halves anything only occurs once, no matter what sort of orders you're on. But they don't counteract each other, right? So like lock on, you can't turn. Come to a new heading does you no good because you're prevented from turning by lock on.
Yeah.
But really what it's built for is that you can do things like lock on and reload ordnance or, brace and lock on or those sorts of things. And you can't deny it's real good.
Yeah, it allows you to do some fancy shenanigans that your opponent might not have expected. Although, really, if your opponent is playing against you and you're using a narrative Gloriana, shenanigans should be expected because they are made of 80% shenanigans.
It's true. And like Steven said, normally this rule is to represent the fact that everyone on that bridge is the very best of the best. But for the World Eaters, like they run through bridge crew, they're getting like chain axed and randomly assassinated and all sorts of stuff. I can't imagine that by like the middle of the Heresy, their bridge crew is really better than anybody else. But they have Latara Saren, and that counts for a great deal.
Yeah. Yep. I would rather have one Latara Saren than any other admiral in any other publication.
Yep. Nelson can suck it.
Yep, he can.
Honor Harrington, God rest her, can suck it.
Ravensburg can suck it. Mm-hmm. The guy in Execution Hour, whose name I suddenly can't remember.
Alexis Pollux can suck it.
Yep, especially Alexis Pollux.
Especially him.
Even Perturabo can suck it.
Perturabo doesn't enter into it. He lost to a regular Marine.
No, poor
And he'd lose to Latara Saren, that's for damn sure.
He would. Can prove it with math, and probably, you know what? We could prove it with an actual game. Harumph.
But speaking of math.
Yes. So, we have mentioned boarding actions several times. But we've never actually talked about what it is. So if you look on page 34 of your basic blue book, you find advanced rules for the end phase, and in big friendly letters, it says boarding actions. Now, boarding actions are distinctly different from a hit and run attack. A hit and run attack, 20 Marines pile into an Assault Claw or a Thunderhawk or whatever. They get in.
Teleport pad.
They do whatever damage they can, and if they're lucky, they get out. Boarding action is everyone. Every Marine on that ship is maglocking the bolts to his thigh. Every armsman is getting his shot cannon ready. Everybody is getting ready to fight. So instead of, 30, 40, 50, 60 squads of Marines going in and doing stuff, it's 500, 700, 900, 1,000 Marines. Again, the Triari, which I believe are company strength, are specifically boarding specialists.
If they're like the Triari of old, they'll be half the size of a regular World Eaters company.
Well, who knows? Math is fake, and numbers are basically made up.
I mean, there's 3 of them, so that's at least a company and a half, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and boarding actions also aren't quite what you think they are. Because I know in your head right now, you're like picturing Master and Commander, but in space, where, you've got the grappling hooks and everybody's swinging across on ropes and jumping from one ship to the other. Not entirely true, because space is big, right?
Wide, you might say.
Indeed. And this also answers a question that at least I had for quite a while about the design of all the ships in this fucking universe. Because you have guns on the right, guns on the left. If you've got a big enough engine, you've got guns on top, but no guns on bottom. And that always struck me as real dumb, because space, up
Four
and down
dimensions.
don't matter.
Yeah.
You're fighting in all the dimensions. Or if you're just, if you're orbiting a planet, right, they always show, the belly is towards the planet. And I'm like, that's dumb, because there are no guns there. Doesn't make a damn bit of sense. Well, God bless Execution Hour, because that and Shadow Point, the 2 Battlefleet Gothic books of yore that I may have emailed GW a time or two asking for a reprint. describe a boarding action when the HMS Solar Macarius, or HDMS Solar Macarius, is boarded by a Chaos cruiser. And what the cruiser does is it comes up, it comes at him like normal and gets into visual range where you can actually, like, not a point of light, but can actually, like, see the ship.
Yeah.
And then it rolls and presents its underbelly to the Macarius. And that's where all the boarding shit comes from. And it's like boarding pods and little, like, lighter shuttles and, like, literally dudes with, like,
Big,
jetpacks.
huge sets of armor, yeah.
Yeah, just, like, flinging themselves across the intervening, 100 miles or whatever it is, 10 miles, who knows. So, yeah, that's why there are no guns on the bottom, because that's where all, apparently, the boarding craft and whatnots are. And that also suddenly makes sense when all these planetary assault, pictures and paintings and drawings that we see of the ships with their bellies towards the planet, well, that's because all of the shit they would, like, pump out to go to the planet, like, that's where it comes from. So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, boarding actions in the game. So even though the actual fight happens in the end phase, you have to declare that you're doing a boarding action in the movement phase. So what happens is, if you're going to attempt to board an enemy ship, you can't fire or launch ordnance in the same turn because, your crew is getting their boarding pikes and shot cannons ready. They don't have time for it. So all you have to do is be in base to base with an enemy ship, which, remember, is still, technically quite a ways apart. But you get in base to base, and, your ship does that belly up maneuver, and suddenly you're launching 1,000 Space Marines and 5,000 or 6,000 other dudes into the dark void at the enemy ship. Then what happens?
Now, you roll a d6. Now, you roll off. And you might be thinking, well, that's kind of simple for something as, like, supposedly complicated and complex as a boarding action. And you're right. That's why there's modifiers.
It's true. So we're going to walk you through this. And because fate determined it, we're going to have a World Eaters strike cruiser up against the White Scars Slaughter class cruiser Batar.
Yes.
Straight from their sample fleet list on page 26.
Mm-hmm.
And
Against the Hateful Tenacity, the World Eater strike cruiser.
Yep. So you can imagine it, right? The Batar on all ahead full to get close with the rest of its White Scars buddies. Got a little too excited, got way out in front of everybody else, and the World Eater strike cruiser has decided to jump on it.
Mm-hmm. So the modifiers apply to both parties. In this particular instance, we're just going to speak as if the strike cruiser has gotten the best case scenario on the slaughter, just so we can make it as simple as possible, because there is a little bit of brain work involved. So,
yeah, we did the math beforehand, and we still might fuck it up.
You, being the strike cruiser, gets +1 to your d6 roll if the enemy ship, being the slaughter, has blast markers in contact with it.
It does not.
If the enemy ship is crippled, you get +2.
Nope. Brand new.
If the enemy ship is on special orders, you get +1.
And it is, because it went on all ahead full to get in this terrible position.
Mm-hmm. If you are orcs or chaos. Now, pause. There's no such thing as Chaos Space Marines yet, as of this moment. I mean, there are, right, but there's not so many that they're a whole distinct class. And originally, Chaos, kind of getting a +1 modifier was to represent that the ships are just filled with heretic zealots they just want to kill you for the glory of the gods.
Like, some of those little assault boats that are hitting your ship are just filled with spawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And then orcs are naturally big and scary and really good at crumping
Millions of
stuff.
them. Yep.
So, for the purpose of Battlefleet Heresy, only orcs get a +1. Now, if you and your buddies are doing narrative stuff and you're playing late Heresy and you think, well, at this point,
Take it into the Scouring.
yeah, you take it into the Scouring, you're like, well, my Marines are, whatever, or my Traitor Imperial Army ship is whatever. You can do that +1.
Don't let us
but
stop
kind of,
you.
yeah, but kind of, make sure that everybody's on board with it.
Yeah, if you're running at one of our events, chaos isn't a thing.
Correct.
Space
So,
Marines.
Speaking of which, Space Marines get a +2. And now for another note. So in the very beginning of the Red Book, we have under Special Rules Legions in the Void, and the second part of that rule states that any ship with an Astartes crew constitutes as an Astartes ship. Any ship drawn from the Space Marine fleet list, battle barge, strike cruisers, Novus, Hunter, Gladius, are assumed to already have Astartes crewmen aboard, although they must still pay 20 points for Terminators. As they are custom built and equipped for Space Marines, those specific ships confer a +2 bonus to boarding actions, +3 bonus for Terminators. This is not in addition to the +2 depicted here on the boarding modifiers table. What appears in the Red Book is essentially a reprint of that particular modifier, because that rule, that modifier, is built into the point cost of battle barges and strike cruisers.
Yeah.
So if you are in a strike cruiser or a battle barge, you don't get +4. You just get +2 because you're Space Marines.
But you didn't have to pay extra for it,
But you didn't have to pay extra.
which
All
is
right?
exciting.
So, boarding value is higher than the enemy ship. You get +1. If it is twice the enemy ships, you get +2. If it is 3 times, you get +3. And if it is 4 or higher, you get +4. Now, you only apply whichever of those is the highest. So if you somehow manage to get, +3, you don't also get the +2 and the +1. And now we have to pause again to talk about boarding value. And here's again where the math starts to get,
This is
mathy.
definitely the part that trips people up when they're doing this sort of math. So when you're doing boarding. So boarding value is equal to the number of damage points a ship has remaining. So in our particular scenario, everybody is perfectly at full health because the math is hard enough already. But if your ship had already taken 2 or 3 points of damage, your dictator takes 2 points of damage, it would have a boarding value of 6. And then the ship being boarded also adds its number of remaining turrets. And what that means is if you're on like a special order or something that halves your turret value or whatever, that doesn't affect this. But if you're crippled and that halves your turret value, that would count it, right? So our Batar Slaughter class cruiser has 8 hull points and it's being boarded. So it's 2 turrets tack on. It's at 10. That's its boarding value.
Meanwhile, the Hateful Tenacity is a Slaughter strike cruiser with 6 hull points. Now you're thinking, well, 6, that's not as good as 10. Ha ha ha, and you're right. The good news is it also has the Mark of Khorne because it's an Astartes ship. So right off the bat, its boarding value is 12. It's like getting boarded by a battleship.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, which is great. So that doesn't give it any additional. Just the Mark of Khorne takes it up to 12. Its boarding value is higher than the Batar's, so it gets a +1 to the boarding modifier.
Yes, the modifier, not the results.
Yes, so boarding modifier and boarding value are 2 separate things, and boarding value only adds a boarding modifier.
Yep. So, to sum up where we're at right now, the Batar has no blast markers. The enemy's not on special orders. It is a Space Marine ship, so it is getting +2 to the results that we're going to get to here in a moment.
Yes. The Hateful Tenacity has +2 for having Space Marines. We're going to be extra rude and give it Terminators, so it gets a +3. And its boarding value is higher than the enemy's, so it gets an additional +1.
And then that enemy ship is on special orders, +5.
So, yep, so that's another one. So its total modifier to the boarding action roll, that d6 roll, is a 5. Meanwhile, the Batar has a
2.
2. So it's looking real dicey for the Batar right off the bat. Say Austin and I roll, and we both roll a 6.
I've got a die right here. We can do it.
No, well, shit, I don't... Mine are in another room.
All right, well, fine then.
Yeah, say we...
You can just pick whatever number you want, and I'll roll a die.
4.
I rolled a 6.
Well,
This is actually instructive, though. We'll keep it.
yes.
So,
So Austin rolls the 6. He adds the +2. He has 8. I roll a 4. I add a +5. I have 9.
yep.
Now we get to the results table.
So, the first thing that happens is for every point a ship lost combat by, you take a point of damage. So, the Batar, right off the bat, takes a point of damage. This can cause critical hits just like normal, because it's just damage that's happening. But in addition, there's also a chance that each ship could suffer a critical hit. And this represents, counterboarding, or maybe like, hey, we jettisoned, they had to jettison that frickin' plasma macro cannon into space because we'd done a bunch of rude things to it, and that just hit our cruiser not great. Or,
bad.
Whatever's happening around. And so you look down, and there's a little table there on page 34. The difference in score is only 1, so this would count as a stalemate. So we would both inflict critical hits on each other on a 5-up. And then if the difference in scores is 2, the winner inflicts on 4s, the enemy on 5s. On a 3, it inflicts on 3, the enemy on 6s. On 4, attackers do it on a 2-up, defenders do it on a 6. Anything more than that, the loser takes an automatic critical hit, and the winner just can't suffer a critical hit.
Yeah. So when you stack up your boarding modifiers, like the World Leaders can and should, once you get up there, even if you don't roll fantastic on that d6, you can still have a considerable advantage over your opponent.
That was literally the best the Batar could do under the circumstances. Like, I rolled a natural 6. If that becomes, I did it again, it's a 2. I've taken 5 points of damage, each of which can cause a critical hit, and I suffer an automatic critical hit just for showing up. So,
Yep. It's a bad time.
Yeah. So that could be, any of the gamut, right? I just rolled a friggin' 10. That's not good. Like, problems occur, right? And this is a strike cruiser. You're not even doing it right. I mean, strike cruisers are great for this, specifically for World Eaters, because they are fast, they're heavily armored, so they can, run and go do this to enemy cruisers. But, maybe you put all this on a slaughter. Right? That's going real fast. That's fairly maneuverable. Cause somebody a real bad time.
Yep. And God forbid you get boarded by a battleship. You're going to have a real hard time.
And really, as someone who plays, not World Eaters ever, but has played a lot of Battlefleet Gothic, I cannot tell you how just unsettling it is for a strike cruiser to be able to beat a perfectly fine cruiser in a boarding action. It just shouldn't happen, right? Because it just shouldn't. And yet
here we are.
It's impossible to not.
Yeah. And this is what Space Marines were built for when the list first came out. It was for hopping on other people's ships and punching them in the dick.
Yep. So, you might say that's all well and good, but what happens if that strike cruiser gets way out of its league and boards a battleship and manages to tie combat? Well, in the case of a tied combat, that's when the ships actually start like grappling together, right? So this normal boarding action that we just went through, next turn, the Batar can run away, right? Or the strike cruiser can just leave. Like, they're not forced to stay there. But in the event of a draw, the ships grapple together and continue fighting in each subsequent end phase. So each player's end phase, you're going twice a game turn. Neither ship may move, shoot, or launch ordnance until the boarding action results in one of the ships being reduced to 0 damage. You're in it to win it. Death or glory.
Because now you've got crews on both ships, from both ships, just desperately trying to kill everything that they see, either to fight their way out or to spike an engine or something.
Yeah, slaughter all the bridge crew, take control of environmentals, anything you can think of. And honestly, like, this is one of the great things about Execution Hour. There's a great moment where the Lord Solar Macarius is sent to go stop a Dauntless that is turned traitor, and it's got some sort of like important like intel on it that they've got to run down. So instead of destroying it, they decide to board, and it actually shows you the boarding action, and it's just insane because to go all the way back to that like Master and Commander, that's not really what this is doing. Once you're actually on the ship, that's exactly what's doing. That scene of like 60 dudes all pressed so tightly together they can't really swing their arms and they just have like boarding pikes.
Yep.
Imagine that, but in hallways.
Yeah, I will read you a little excerpt out of the Red Book. You think you know war, Dirtsiders? Ha! I've seen plasma roll through half a deck in the time it takes to blink and take 2,000 souls with it. I've seen a pinprick of light 1,000,000 kilometers away that was the death of 180,000 men who were bent on killing me a moment before. I've been in crush fights where men were fighting each other with pikes and wrenches and bare teeth until they died of asphyxiation because the scrubbers were drowned in blood. I've seen 100 men happy at mess 1 second and sucked screaming out of a hull breach into the void the next. You Dirtsiders know war under an open sky, but I know war in a metal box full of the worst deaths you can imagine. But you'll learn, Dirtsiders, you'll learn. Those of you that live, anyway. Petty Officer Barossa to the former members of the 18th Latimar Infantry upon their reassignment to the Grand Cruiser Perdition's Honor as ship's armsman. It's tough fighting in a ship, y'all.
It's a bad time. It's a real bad time.
Lots of bad deaths, and there's one that sees them all.
Yep.
So there's a couple of extra things to boarding actions. They're not super common or even super important. The first thing is you'll notice that it is possible to get 4 or more times the enemy's boarding value. And really the only way to do that is multi-ship boarding actions. When that happens, you follow all the basic rules, but you add all involved ships' boarding values together to get your modifier. And then you can, if you are a brave or foolish soul, board with escort ships. They can do it using the rules described. They can even attempt to board capital ships if they wish, although escorts will only stand a chance against a badly damaged vessel. Remember that when escorts are boarding or being boarded, a successful critical hit will destroy them, so it is quite possible for an escort to win a boarding action but be destroyed in the process. I do not personally know why you would try to board a capital ship with escorts unless you're using a whole squadron of them to tie up the ship.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah, because you have to stay there, right? And, well,
Only
I
if
don't
you
know.
draw. Yeah, no. So it's only
Can
the
tar pit a capital ship, basically, is what I'm asking?
No. So, well, it'd be really hard, right? Because the can't move or shoot, or can't shoot or launch ordnance is only for the ship attempting to board that phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you very specifically need to tie the combat.
Yes.
So you could aim for that, theoretically. You know, I put 5 of my Space Marine crew ships up against a cruiser, and like my odds aren't great, but if I roll a 5 and he rolls a 2, then we've tied, and you know the other guy's dictator is out of the game for a couple of turns. But it's a bad idea. I've generally only seen it when like 3 or 4 escorts will jump on a cruiser with 1 hull point left.
Yeah, that's about the only time I could think about it.
Or if you need a little extra oomph, right? So I've seen it where like a not World Eater's strike cruiser, who doesn't need to do this, but like a strike cruiser will jump on a cruiser, and an escort squadron also will, to provide a little more boarding value.
Yeah, because I guess you can only perform a counter action against one ship at a time, and theoretically it's the first ship that boards you.
No, it becomes multi-boarding. And then the attacker distributes the hits. So it can be real bad. And the critical hits happen or can happen to everybody, right? So in that case, say we got a stalemate and it's a strike cruiser and 3 escorts. You crit the strike cruiser on a 5-up, and you crit each individual escort on a 5-up.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's not a great idea, but sometimes you just feel the hand of corn on your shoulder and you go crazy.
Sometimes you got to do it. Yeah.
But, sometimes you want to get a little froggy about it. It's also kind of hilarious. I've seen escort squadrons try to board other escort squadrons. And just like, it didn't work because he wasn't really thinking. He's like, oh, I've got 6 Cobra, or I think he had like 5 Cobras, and I had 5 Novas, and his Cobras had fired torpedoes already and had failed to reload ordnance, right? So he was like, well, I'll do this, and that'll work. Unfortunately, and it seemed like all right. You got 5, I got 5, or 1 whole point apiece. But he forgot that defenders add turrets in. So I wound up having a boarding value 3 times the enemy's. And I think I killed 2. It's I won the combat by 2, so 2 just died.
Right.
And then I critted another 2, which just kills them. And then, just kind of went about my day.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, because it was 5 individual boarding actions, and it didn't work.
Well, I think that's just about everything.
Yeah, because we've
World
already
Eaters.
talked about hit and runs, and that's the other.
Yeah.
Talked about those plenty.
Yep. We've fanboyed over Lotara again.
So much.
If you want to read more about Lotara, the books in question, well, there's 2 novels and everything else is shorts. Butcher's Nails is the first one she appears in. Mm-hmm. Then you have Betrayer, and she's not in First Heretic. Never mind.
Yeah, no. Why would she be in First Heretic?
Yeah, no. Well, I kept thinking like Shadow Crusade stuff, but no, she's in Betrayer, is where she gets most of her screen time. Mm-hmm. She's in Siege of Terra.
Book 1, right?
No, not book 1. It's wherever. It's
when they're talking about letting Angron out.
Is it First Wall or Lost in the Damned?
I think the Lost and the Damned.
Yeah, she's in Lost in the Damned. There's not a whole lot of void action, but she is there.
Just briefly.
Yeah, but the best probably short with her in it is Rose Watered with Blood.
Yeah,
spoiler alert, she's the Rose.
Yeah. And she is.
Yep.
A rose made of adamantium.
So the next episode we're gonna do, we'll probably figure it out. We're probably gonna do more Legions, at least for one other episode.
We're gonna go to the Ultramarines, boys. Do you want to be heroes in the sky?
Yeah. We'll probably do a twofer. We'll probably do Ultramarines and Death Guard.
Yeah, they're both fairly straightforward in what they do. And let's face it, we think they're both kind of boring, even though I love the Death Guard.
I love the Death Guard too, but their Legion rule, there's not a lot to it.
Nope.
It's pretty simple, pretty easy to grasp.
The Ultramarines one is deceptively good, though. We'll get into that.
Yes. So yeah, we do have something special planned pretty soon here once we kind of coordinate it. It's a little harder to do than just hopping on and reading out of a PDF or a blue book. We kind of thought it would be cool to do and we'll probably do this in conjunction with a new book club, a Void Battle in Literature episode. We're going to talk about books at a Black Library that have a pretty sizable focus on Void Warfare. So you know what to read when you want your fix. So that'll be fun. Looking forward to that. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about Execution Hour a lot.
Yeah, we are. It's so good. Shadow Point, which likewise is very good.
Yes. So, I guess until next time, remember that sometimes you can blow an enemy up with a macro cannon or a lance or a torpedo, but most of the time, chain axes and bolt shells, baby.
That'll win you the war.
Good hunting.
Captain of the Norway, born in Union Side. The Maziani fear her, she's the heart of Norway's pride. And stationed her, or merchant her, from far gone back to Pell. Call for Mallory, all Norway would fight demons out of hell.
Thanks for listening to another podcast from the Remembrancers Retreat. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. You can also find our swag store at teespring.com/stores/RR30K podcast. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at RR30K podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Remembrancers_retreat. You can also visit our website, RR30K.com, for podcast updates and the Battlefleet Heresy Compendium. You can also leave us a voicemail for us to play on a future podcast at 1-929-437-3791. That's 1-929-HERESY1. And you can also leave us an email at theremembrancersretreat@gmail.com. Thanks again.